The hour of 6:30 PM having arrived, I will call to order this regular meeting of the Planning Board. This meeting is also being broadcast live on the City of Keene YouTube channel. The video is also streamed on the city's website and is posted on the website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Anyone wishing to view a copy of the agenda and supporting materials will find it on the city website. To receive electronic copies of future agenda packets, please go to the homepage and subscribe to the city meetings email list. The public and other board members will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. Will staff please conduct the roll?
Harold Farrington,
Here.
David Orgaz, Mayor George Hansel, Councillor Mike Remy, Emily Levine Bernier,
Here.
Roberta Mastro Giovanni,
Here.
Ryan Clancy,
Here.
Armando Rangel,
Here.
and for the alternates, Gail Summers, Randon Markelon, Tammy Adams, and Kenneth Cost.
Here.
And Mr. Chair, if you'd like to invite Mr. Cost to participate as a voting member, there's slots for him to do so.
Yeah, I think that would be prudent. Mr. Koss, would you like to participate as a voting member for this meeting?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So noted. Okay. So our next meeting, next agenda item is the minutes of previous meetings. Note that we have two meetings. We had a special meeting on November 13th, and then the regular planning board meeting on November 27th. So let's do it one at a time, I guess. So can I get a,
I would like to recuse myself from the special meeting since I was not in attendance, if that's what we're voting on first.
okay, sure. So is there a motion to approve the minutes of November 13th?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of November 13th.
Thank you. Is there a second? Ms. Levine Bernier? I guess, okay, so that's a second. All right, so motion having been forwarded and seconded, any discussion, comments, questions? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Minutes from November 13th are approved. Next one is the regular planning board meeting from November 27th. May I ask for a motion to approve those minutes?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from November 27th.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second, to approve the
Thank you.
minutes.
Thank you. Any questions, discussions, or comments? I have one comment. On line 251 of the minutes, the word driveway, I think really should be crosswalk. You see that? Okay, all right. So that would be a recommended change I would make. Having done so, we can move to a vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes? Any opposed? Minutes are approved as amended. Thank you. Now we'll move on to a standing agenda item, which is the final vote on conditional approvals. So as a matter of practice, the board will issue a final vote on all conditionally approved plans after all the conditions precedent have been met. This final vote will be the final approval and will start the 30-day appeal clock. May I ask if there are any applications ready for final approval tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Mary Brenner, Senior Planner. We do have one application that's ready for final approval tonight. It is a boundary line adjustment application for the properties at 26 Prospect Street and 361 Court Street, project S-04-23. There were 4 conditions of approval. The submittal of the 4 full-size paper copies, 2 Mylar copies, and a digital copy of the final plan. The owner's signature appears on the plan, submittal of a check to cover the cost of recording fees, and the inspection of lot monuments by the Public Works Director or their designee to ensure that the monuments have been set, and all of those conditions have been met.
Okay, great. Do you have a sample motion for that?
Yes, I would like to move to issue final approval for S-04-23.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay. Now let's move to a final vote on the final approval for the conditional approval. All those in favor? Any opposed? Final approval is issued. Thank you. Okay. That is all of the external business, if you will. So we now move to a discussion of the 2024 meeting schedule. It's in the packet. Has everyone had a chance to see the meeting schedule? I think it's pretty much the 4th Monday with exception of May, right?
And Mr. Chair, I did have one question for the board. The December meeting in 2024 falls on December 23rd. And I just wanted to check with the board if you felt that that should be shifted to be 1 week earlier, which would make it December 16th. I'll leave that decision up to you, but it's better to decide that ahead of time because it would shift the application deadline for
Sure.
that month.
Sure. Any preferences? Mr. Clancy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was already going to propose an amendment to this date for the 16th instead of the 23rd, so.
Okay. Any other comments?
I think that makes sense. You know, for myself, I think the 23rd would be fine, but I think for, you know, for participation, I think the week previous might be good.
Okay, thanks. All right, so we have a proposal to amend the December date to the 16th of December, 2024. So let's vote on that. So all those in favor of the schedule as amended? Any opposed?
Mr. Chair, sorry, I can't recall. Did you get a motion and a second on that one?
Do we need a motion?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's fine. You have a motion for that, Roberta? For the for the calendar?
I'd like to have a motion to approve the 2024 meeting schedule
As amended.
as amended.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, now let's move to the vote. So all those in favor of the amended schedule? Great. Any opposed? No? Okay. Schedule is approved. Next thing on the agenda is the Master Plan Steering Committee, continuation of the discussion from our previous meeting. And we have Mary, staff would like to make a short presentation.
Yes, I will try to keep it brief. So hold on one second while I get this set up. Okay, so I did want to give you a brief presentation tonight just to kind of recaps the process that staff is proposing for the master plan update. Many of these slides should look familiar to you. I kind of repurposed the presentation that you saw in July. But just as a quick reminder, this project has been planned for in the city's capital improvement program for a number of years. I think it first showed up, I want to say in the 2017 CIP. It was initially scheduled to start a few years ago, but was delayed due to several factors such as COVID. And so my presentation tonight has 3 parts. The first part I'm going to try to breeze through pretty quickly. That's the overview of master plans generally and the planning board's role. You already heard that presentation back in July, but I thought it would be a good refresher. And then I want to give a very high-level overview of the timeline and the proposed process. Again, you saw that in July, but some of the process has changed slightly, so I just want to highlight some of those changes. And then I want to give an overview of the process that we went through to nominate individuals for the steering committee. So jumping right in. So what is a master plan? Hopefully you are all pretty familiar by now, but basically it's a long-range planning document that serves as a guide for citywide growth and development, as well as major capital investments. It's also the foundation or the basis for public policy, zoning, and land use decisions. There are 2 mandatory sections of the master plan. The first is a vision section, and the second is a land use section, both of which are shown here on the screen. Those are the only 2 sections that are required, and having a master plan with those 2 sections is a prerequisite for things like having a zoning ordinance or creating a historic district or having a capital improvement program. So it's important for local government in general to have a master plan that meets all of the basic requirements. In addition to those 2 mandatory sections, there are 15 optional sections in the state RSA, which are listed up on the screen. And I'm not going to read them all, you can read them for yourself. The state also recommends that master plans be updated every 5 to 10 years. State statute also outlines the process for adoption. The master plan is initially adopted by the planning board after a duly noticed public hearing that requires a 10-day notice. It can be adopted section by section, so you could do the vision chapter 1 year, the land use chapter the next year, the transportation chapter the next year, et cetera, or you can do it all at once, which is what Keene has done. Amendments or updates to the master plan are adopted following that same process. And then in Keene, similar to many other communities in New Hampshire, the planning board also refers the plan to the city council for their endorsement prior to adoption. And that's an important step because getting the buy-in and support of city council is really important. Well, it is the planning board's authority to prepare and amend and adopt the master plan. It's really the city council that implements the master plan through the budgeting process. So in other words, they kind of hold the purse strings for the city, so to speak. Moving right along. So the proposed process for this master plan update, as I mentioned earlier, the CIP includes a budget for 2 years to update the master plan. We're already about 6 months in, leaving 18 months for the remainder. We're currently in what I've been referring to as the pre-project preparation phase, which really has 2 major steps. The first one is the formation of a project steering committee. I'll talk about this more in the presentation, but just to remind you all, back in July, staff had originally proposed that the steering committee the members would be nominated by the planning board and then confirmed by city council. Based on feedback that we got from the planning board at that meeting, we kind of went back to the drawing table. We consulted with the city attorney and proposed an alternate process whereby we asked the individuals to be nominated by the mayor with input from the planning board chair, and then confirmed by the planning board, because the city attorney really felt that this should be a committee of the planning board because of your role in adopting, being the body that adopts the master plan ultimately. And then we have, from the beginning, our goal is to have the steering committee start meeting in January of 2024, and the role would be to provide overall direction and guidance on the project. And then the second task that we've been working on is hiring a consultant. And this would be a professional consulting firm or team of firms to help us with all phases of the project. We've been working on this task as well and currently have a recommendation for the consultant selection that will be going to City Council on Thursday. We went to the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee last week with our recommendation, and they voted to recommend that move forward to City Council this week. All right, so once the project officially launches, the first phase will, what we're proposing should be the first phase, would include the update to the Keene Community Vision and the update to the Community Snapshot. The Community Snapshot is really all the statistics and trends such as socioeconomic data or demographic data, public health indicators, housing statistics, things like that. And then the community-wide vision is really the most, that's the part of the project that's going to involve the most robust public engagement. That's where we're really trying to hear from as many voices as possible in the community. And so that's what we're proposing would be done in phase one. And our goal is to have that take about 9 months, so about half of the project timeframe. And then phase two is the drafting of the comprehensive plan and the future land use map. So this would include drafting and writing the plan itself, the development of graphics, developing the future land use map, doing the final document layout, things like that. During this phase, the consultant would continue to work with staff and the steering committee and the technical advisory committee, and continue public engagement and communication. And then the final phase would be adoption. So we're hoping that this would start in July of 2025. And the process that we're proposing is that the steering committee would make a recommendation. They would vote to recommend that the master plan be adopted. It would go to City Council for review and endorsement. So City Council would vote to endorse the master plan. And then the planning board would hold a public hearing with that 10-day notice and adopt the master plan. And then that would be the end of the process. So I guess I'm going to pause right there and ask, are there any questions about the master plan, the planning board's role, the overall process that we're proposing?
Mr. Clancy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the first question I want to ask is, when the city presented this to the board back in July, what was the allocated budget for this project?
Sure. So the City Council, through the Capital Improvement Program, had approved $50,000 in fiscal year '24, so that's the year that we're currently in, and $40,000 in fiscal year '25. So at this point in time, through the budgeting process, only $50,000 has been allocated. But with the once we issued our RFQ, our request for qualifications back in October, we got 5 responses, all of them in the range of $160,000 to $175,000. So we are requesting that City Council allocate additional funding to this project to account for that difference in the budget.
Thank you for pointing it out, because I saw the meeting, and I understand it's not our concern necessarily with how this process is going to be carried, but it falls back on the planning board of the dollar figure. So my next question is, what was said back in that July meeting that it made you feel like that we didn't want to be part of the search committee process for the consultant? Because I saw that the search committee didn't have any planning board members on it, And that concerns me because planning board is in charge of making sure this master plan gets done, so.
Yeah, so we followed our typical bidding procedures when we formed the selection committee. Typically, the process that we follow is that we create a selection committee. More often than not, unless it's a really big project, it's usually just staff, but in this instance, because it's a big project, we wanted to include someone who, we were trying to include someone who was from city council, but was also on the proposed master plan steering committee. And so we had Phil Jones, who's a city councilor. He's, at the time that we were forming the selection committee back in September, he was proposed to be on the steering committee. I mean, he still is as an alternate. And another reason why we thought it would be good to include him is he was involved in the master plan process back in 2010. He was a city councilor at the time, and I thought, he had a unique perspective to bring to the table because of his prior experience. And so we had a selection committee of 5 people. It included our marketing and communications director, Rebecca Landry, the Parks, Recreation, and Facilities Director, Andrew Bohannon, the Community Development Director, Jesse Rounds, myself, and then Counselor Jones. And I'm happy to go through the process. That is all outlined in the memo that was included in the FOP packet last week. But, yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to continue. But back in July, you told us that you wanted steering committee members to be part of the selection committee. And I understand that Phil Jones is a nomination to the steering committee, but we don't have a steering committee in place. So my initial question was, what did the board say at the July meeting that made you feel like we didn't want to be part of that process?
I don't think anyone said anything that made me feel like you didn't want to be part of the process. If I recall, I think we said that we would try to include someone from the steering committee on the selection committee, which I know that the steering committee hasn't been formally formed, but we included someone who's proposed to be on it. Yeah, but I don't think there was any intention to leave anyone out. We were just sort of following our normal procedure that we do with these types of projects. So, yeah.
Other questions or comments? I have one question. One thing that maybe I've overlooked it, but it appears to be missing from the project planning is some input from some authority with respect to expected trends or things we can expect in the future. I mean, it's great to have the community's input on what they think, but they may think, we're all going to have jetpacks and fly around and not need any cars or transportation. But, I mean, it would be nice to have some external information about, and I know some of the population stuff is in there, but other trends, either in transportation or energy or, construction or what have you. So just a note, and I'll certainly keep that in the back of my mind as we move forward.
Thank you. Yes, I think actually the consultant firm that we are recommending as the front runner, their name is Future IQ, and they're very much their whole focus is on trends and what the future will bring. So I think that they will definitely bring that to the table if they're selected.
Sounds like I'll like them.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Levine.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to add that I liked your comment, and I was thinking that too, but I was really hoping, I had faith in the consultant and that they would bring that to the table. So thank you both for that.
Okay. Mr. Cost.
I have one other just thought for future thinking about this. I thought I did that, I'm sorry. One other thought. my understanding of the comprehensive plan is it's really the tool, a tool for the planning board to go back to and base our decisions on. In other words, that's our benchmark. We go back to the plan. And so I guess I'd like, as it gets into it, the consultant really does keep that in mind, because I think we really need that tool. It'd be very nice to have a sort of a clear, process checklist so that we don't maybe go off into other directions and talk about things or try to make decisions without guidance, but we really can pin our thinking to, is this consistent with the master plan? Other people make other decisions, but our role is to stick to, I think, the master plan primarily. So that would just be a very helpful thing, I think, for me, maybe other planning board members. Thank you.
Great. Go ahead.
Mr. Clancy? Go ahead.
Just a hundred, so 160,000 seems like a lot, and that, from my understanding, this is a master plan update, not an overhaul. But maybe I'm wrong in that, because when I look back at the master plan, it's a great guideline, and still it needs a little updating for sure, but there's a lot of stuff on there that we haven't accomplished. And so, in my mind, I'm just trying to justify this process that we're conducting, and it seems more like an overhaul and a changing completely of the current master plan that needs updating. So my question would be, with the list that we're given for nominations, what is the purpose of that committee? And not in terms of getting us to the end goal, but are they just to help us guide us through that process, or are they supposed to deliver us the final result? Because I understand there's going to be hopefully breakout groups and stuff like that. But in terms, is it supposed to be efficient and be a guidance to get us through it as fast as possible, or are they supposed to be a reflection of our community today?
So maybe, since you're asking about the steering committee, it might be helpful for me to just go through the last portion of the presentation. But I think it's more of a guide, or like the role is to guide the process. What we're proposing is somewhere between a full overhaul and just doing a surface update. It's the amount of the actual amount of updating that needs to occur, I think, falls somewhere in the middle there. The vast majority of the work that the consultant will be doing, though, is really around updating the snapshot and doing the public outreach and engagement. The public outreach and engagement, I think, is about 50% of the cost. And we felt that that's something that we didn't want to skimp on. At least that's what staff feels. And I understand that the price is a lot higher than what was initially put into the CIP several years ago, but unfortunately, costs across the board have really gone up. It's not just this project. Like, I think almost every single project that city staff have been bringing forward to city council has had major cost increases just because costs have gone up so much recently. We did reach out to several other communities to see what their budget was, and anyone that's had a master plan done in the last couple of years were in the same ballpark for cost. So we did do a request for qualifications to see what the different budgets could be that we could get. And it really comes down to whether we want to have a robust public engagement component or not. If we took out a lot of the public engagement, we could probably get the cost down to something like $120,000. But then we don't have the capacity as staff to do the level of public engagement that we think our community would expect and want. So that's where the budget considerations come from. But we'll also be, I think, talking about that at City Council on Thursday, so that might be another opportunity to weigh in on the project budget. But moving forward to the steering committee, I did want to give a quick overview of the nomination process. So going back to the purpose of the steering committee, It's really to provide guidance to the planning board, to city staff, and the selected consultants throughout the course of the master plan update project. We're planning to set up a regular monthly meeting time for the steering committee and then hold meetings as needed. So for example, if like, let's say in March, we don't really have any business for the steering committee to discuss, we'll just cancel the meeting and not hold it rather than pull the group together for no reason. But we're gonna set up a regular monthly meeting time so that they get on the calendar. We expect that the committee will be asked to weigh in on things like the community engagement plan and, that could include things like ideas for outreach, different groups that we should be making sure that we're engaging with and reaching out to, different voices in the community that should be heard, feedback on the overall structure or outline of the plan, input on sections of the master plan that need updating and, maybe which sections of the master plan don't need to be updated, that sort of thing. And from the start, we proposed having a mix of planning board members, city councilors, and residents on the committee. And we proposed that because we felt it was important to include both the planning board and the city council as the two bodies that are going to be voting on this plan, either to endorse in the case of city council or to adopt in the case of the planning board. However, we also wanted to include leaders from the community that represent different sectors that are important for both current and future city planning. So this slide includes a list of the sectors that were considered for inclusion on the steering committee. Staff developed this list back in July, and then we shared it with the planning board chair, the mayor, the city manager, and the economic development director for their input. I also want to note that as part of this process, kind of as a parallel to the steering committee, there's going to be a technical advisory committee that's formed by the city manager that will include city staff with other perspectives such as emergency management and infrastructure and recreation facilities and things like that. So once we had those categories identified and agreed upon, we met with the mayor, the city manager, and the planning board chair and asked for suggested names that kind of fell into those different categories. So that was, I think, in August that we did that. We used that to compile a list. I do want to note some of those names were not actually names, but they were just like two of them, for example, were a representative from Keene State College or a representative from Cheshire Medical Center. So we didn't know who from that institution, but we knew that we wanted somebody from that institution, and then we reached out to them to see who they'd like to have participate. And so starting in August and then throughout September and a little bit into October, staff spent time reaching out to each person on that initial list to invite them to participate. We were asking people to make a pretty major commitment. So this usually involved reaching out to the person by phone or by email, whatever contact information we had for them, to introduce ourselves if we didn't know them yet. We usually asked for an in-person meeting to discuss the project with them. We also created like a one-page overview sheet that explained, what is a master plan, why is it important, what's the proposed project schedule, and the expected time commitment for the steering committee. And then we also had to confirm with everyone that they're a Keene resident, because that is required by law. And that did narrow our list down a little bit. Our initial list that we kept thinking of names, there's a lot of leaders in the community who don't actually live in Keene, so we ended up having to narrow it down a little bit. But almost every single person that we reached out to said yes, which was really, I think it speaks to the nature of our community and how willing people are to volunteer and help out, which is a great thing. The draft roster was then shared with the mayor for approval and then sent to the planning board in November. I think most of you were at the last meeting, but following the input that you all provided at the last meeting, the chair really did a lot of work, and I'll let Chair Farrington chime in here if you'd like. But between the last meeting and this meeting, really the chair has been doing a lot of work working with the mayor-elect to identify additional individuals to add to the list that they felt responded to the concerns that were raised at the last meeting. So all of that brings us to the roster that was presented to you tonight. We included a list in your packet. There has been one change since the list was included in your packet for slot number 6. In your packet, it says Mark Doyen from Keene State College, who's their facilities manager. And that person we're proposing to change to Leatrice Orem, who's the chief of staff in the president's office at Keene State College. But other than that, the list is the same as what was in your packet. There's now 13 voting members proposed and 4 alternates. And yeah, I think, it is a large group, but I do think that hopefully we'll be able to make quorum with having 13 members be voting members. That means quorum would be 7. And with 4 alternates, we're hopeful that we'll be able to make that. The tentative monthly meeting time at this point in time is very tentatively the first Tuesday of the month at 6:30 p.m. But we still need to confirm that. That still needs to be finalized. But all of those steering committee meetings will be publicly noticed, agendas will be posted, and the public will be able to attend. So that, and do you want me to leave the roster up on the screen for this discussion? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Why don't we get a motion on the table and then go to discussion? So, Roberta?
I'd like to move to establish a master plan steering committee to help guide the City of Keene master plan update and appoint the individuals nominated by the mayor and planning board chair as listed on the memo to the planning board dated December 18th, 2023.
Thank you. Could I have a second? Ms. Bernier?
Yeah, I second that motion.
Thank you. Okay. Now we'll open a discussion. Mr. Clancy?
Before we go into discussion, and there's nothing binding about this, but I would like to propose that in the last election, the mayor and this planning board member, Mr. Remy, Councilor Remy, wrote a letter saying that talking about conflict of interest and the ethics of the city. And even though there was nothing backing those accusations in our code of conduct or anything that we follow, there is a ethics concern here that I think can help spark the direction the city goes in terms of the representation of this board. So I would, sorry that I'm being a little wishy-washy here. I think that looking at this, there's 6 members here tonight voting on this. 4 of these members are nominated to this board. And even though it's not in any of our law, in Robert's rules or bylaws, I would think there is an ethical concern in voting for yourselves to be on such a committee that has such an impact to our city. That's why I asked the question about this committee being efficient versus representative of the community, and that concern that this list, though a good list, it's not the best list I think that could have come up with, and I think it creates an echo chamber that has been felt in this city for a long time with having 4 planning board members, 5 planning board members, and 3 councilors and a mayor-elect being a part of it. So I would just request that the folks that are nominated tonight consider their conflict of interest in this matter.
Other comments? Ms. Libby Bernier?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I can appreciate that viewpoint. I think it's odd to vote myself onto another board. I guess I don't feel better about it. One point is that I won't be on this board any longer. Another is I've been a part of the planning board, but I am also very much a community member, who I feel has every right to be on this board as well as Armando. And I don't think you're saying that at all, but I think, affiliation goes way beyond planning board. But I appreciate, yeah, I agree that the 4-2 and, 4 of us are sitting here and our names are there. I get that, I can see that, but if it's not a law, I'm still gonna vote for myself.
Okay, well, I think, me personally, I think this has gone on, dragged out a little bit. I think it's improved. Honestly, I think if we came up with a new list or tweaked list every month, it would probably continue to improve. But then we would, I think, start to jeopardize the timeline of actually getting the update completed. So I'm comfortable with this list and would like to move forward with the vote. Go ahead, Mr. Clancy.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I understand the desire to move along, but again, one of my questions to the city was efficiency versus representation of this community. And so I understand that they, wanted council representation, wanted planning board representation, and the different aspects of Keene economics and the business community, the college and such. But I look and I see that the 3 downtown businesses that are part of this are food enterprises in the same block. I don't see much of, that's 3 spots taken up that could have a little bit more diversity, I think. In terms of the council representation, I'm surprised that Chair of PLD, Kate Mosley, is not on this list, who has been not only the highest vote recipient in the last 2 elections for at-large, but also has been an outstanding advocate for the community and creates great conversation. I'm surprised not to see that Pamela Slack, the former chair of this committee, was not considered, or Senator Donovan Fenton, who is not only elected to the state, but gives us that voice of what the state's doing, because we need to think more broadly than just the city. So I understand the desire to move forward, and this is a good list, but again, I say it's not the best list. And honestly, 17 people, if we're talking about efficiency, is not going to be efficient, and there's going to be a lot of voices in that. There's only 15 people on council. So I think, and looking at other communities in New Hampshire that have done this similar process, I did not find one community that had a master plan update steering committee or group that exceeded 7, maybe 9 members was the largest one I found. And I just feel like there could be a lot of conflict within moving forward with such a large committee as well. And I understand people are not going to show up and there's time constraints, but seeing that this group was put together very quickly and we're being asked to look at it and not really have much of a say, like, do we have the ability to omit folks from this list and nominate new people tonight, or no?
You absolutely have the right to remove people and add other people. This is your steering committee.
Mr. Clancy.
I'm sorry to keep this going, because my other concern, even though Ms. Levine's going to be stepping down, and I talked with city staff prior to the meeting about my concern, but during my orientation of coming on the planning board, city attorney made me feel like that if I was in a room with other planning board members and there was a quorum, that it would turn into a planning board member. And I know there's nuances there, and we don't know the exact answer tonight, but I'm worried that this large group of planning board representatives would prevent other planning board members from being part of steering committee or showing up to these group sessions as well. So, and then the last time that we did, when we did the master plan in 2010, there was only one current member of planning board. I understand there was possibly other former planning board members part of that process, but there was only one. And I think this might have been one of the reasons why they only had few counselors and planning board members on such a committee, to avoid that conflict.
Ms. Levine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I just ask Ryan to clarify what you just meant about how many planning board members and planning board members being excluded? Can you just say that part, or make it more concise for me?
Yeah, so, I'm talking about quorum, and so I think for planning board, is 4 a quorum, or 5? So if there are 4 members on this group, if 2 planning board members shows up, there's that possible chance of a steering committee meeting turning into a planning board meeting.
Yeah, I think.
And not the intended
I
purpose of
think,
the steering committee. And I know there, I could show up.
Understanding of my conversations
Yeah.
with the city attorney, planning board members can go out and watch a football game and root for a team or another team. That's not a planning board meeting. It's only when you're talking about specific proposals in front of the board. So this does not have the danger of turning into a planning board meeting.
Well, we're discussing the master plan, which is pretty much our sole purpose for being. It's not a football game.
The master plan is a responsibility that we have, and this steering committee is intended to work on that. And we can invite people in at any time we want, and I expect we will invite many people in to our meetings to discuss it. But we're not discussing specific applications.
I think,
So
Ms. Mastrobuoni?
we have our steering committee, but ultimately, at the end of the day, the planning board, do we have the final say? Right. So bear in mind that there's several members on this planning board that are community members, business owners, in addition to, we're not on the steering committee, so that goes a little ways. And, it is a big roster, and I see your point about, the quorum needing to be a lot larger, and if we get stuck with all planning board people on there, I get what that means. But I think we as a group have a final say anyway, and we have a good mix of both community members and business owners, and so I feel pretty comfortable with it. I'm not sure I agree with the election process and how it went down, but I think it's too late to really do anything about it.
Mr. Cost?
Thank you. I think the purpose of the steering committee is really to, what I understand anyway, is to provide guidance. I heard some things here about, maybe help to figure out how we're going to communicate, how the master planners and how our planning professionals are going to communicate with the community. How are they going to get information? And it's a lot of process stuff. Do we have electronic votes? How many meetings? All these other things. Some of that will be in the scope of the work for the consultant, so that'll be taken care of. But I'm not thinking anyway that the steering committee is driving decisions, pushing down agendas. I think it's really to shape the process more than actual decisions. And I think the people on this list and myself also included or interested in that, and I think could input that without saying, here's what we need to see, and we're going to bias it towards this kind of a thing. I don't think there's even that opportunity to do it, and I don't think it would be in the charter of a steering committee. So to me, it's a very high-level guidance kind of a group. Is that correct?
Yes, I would agree with what Mr. Koss was just saying. And I do appreciate, I think when we were starting out, our goal was to keep the membership to 9. Obviously, that did not happen. But we tried, that was our initial attempt. And I think part of what happened there is we reached out to everyone on the list that we initially generated, expecting that some people would say no, and no one did, which is awesome on one hand, but on the other, we ended up with an initial roster that was longer. And then following the discussion at last month's meeting, where there were some concerns raised about adding more diversity in different sectors, that some individuals were added to that, but I'm pretty confident that we have this meeting space in council chambers where we can have our meetings with 13 voting members and 4 alternates. That's a quorum again of 7. I think out of 17 people, we'll hopefully be able to get a quorum of at least 7 people. So in terms of the logistics, I'm not too concerned about the size. I think the most challenging thing is just finding a regular meeting time. But yeah, I do agree, going back to everything that Mr. Koss was just saying about the role. This is only one part of the process, not to downplay it, but there's going to be a lot of additional outreach and engagement of the community beyond the steering committee meetings. The role of the steering committee is, again, to provide input and help guide how the process unfolds, but we are planning to work with our consultant to have focus group teams and to hold community forums and to do surveys and to go to pop-up events and do walking tours and do a whole wide range of community outreach and engagement to make sure that other voices in the community are heard, since this committee won't be able to have every single sector or voice represented. So I hope that helps.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Mr. Clancy, do you have a
Yeah, I do. I just.
amendment to propose?
No, but I mean, I can propose one real quick, but again, it's a large group with half of it being elected or city representatives and not a diverse group that reflects the community. And I understand the importance of it also being efficient, but a group of 17 I don't find being efficient. And then on top of that, we're looking at $160,000. And yes, that's in the hands of city council to approve, but it's a reflection of this board. And at the end of the day, it's going to fall back on this board. And so I think we just have an opportunity to kickstart a master plan update by showing this community that we're willing to show their community in this committee. And and even though this diverse group, in terms of Ms. Bernier being on planning board and also representing downtown business, I just feel like that crosses a lot of borders, and that there's, in terms of city councilors and a mayor-elect, I feel like there's other councilors that might represent that position more. And again, I go back to us being told in July that this committee was going to be formed before a selection committee was being chosen. And that didn't happen, and now we're looking at a $160,000 bill. And the city has gone through a lot of consultants in the past, and we have seen what they do. And I just want to make sure when we're moving forward and thinking about this community, that we're actually thinking about the people in this community and not about what money we can spend or how many of the current group can be included. In that current group, I mean city officials and board members.
Ms. Levine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you see the positive in this list here that some people don't represent? I recognize most of these people and I've looked them up. They don't just represent that. Can you see, you can see that. Like, I represent Prime Roaster Downtown Business and I represent the planning board because I've served on it. But then there's a benefit because I also represent childcare because there's a huge deficit and I've been fighting for childcare and I've hooked up with Deirdre McPartland over at the CDC and she wants to be involved in this. And I know, Jay-Con, I know that you are interested in education and childcare and there's so many sectors and more diversity, LGBTQ community. I think that it's much more diverse this round than, and I honestly don't think in a board like this, in a city like this, and in a world like this, we could all be satisfied with a list moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Khan?
Is this an appropriate, you've got a motion on the floor, I'm just wondering, is it okay
We-
to speak to the motion? Or
I-
just-
Yeah, sure.
I'm not,
But please just come up to the table and make sure the mic is on.
It is,
State your name.
it is indeed.
Should I table the motion?
I think, yeah, I'm not sure, while the board is in deliberation, I'm
Okay.
not sure we can, so you can table the motion, you can, that's.
You probably
Okay.
withdraw it.
So let's consider the motion tabled at the moment.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and just want to address a couple of the points. I think this discussion is valuable. The questions are good to put on the table at this point. I do hope, though, that we recognize the value of this list. It's timely. I appreciate that the chairman and I have had an opportunity to exchange some ideas about the membership, tried to build in some of the diversity that folks questioned if it was sufficient. I can recognize the questions that ought to be raised about the membership, but I also recognize that this is a pretty good list, and I don't know that we could get it to be perfect. I don't think it's worth going back to a drawing board, I guess is my point. I'm excited by the people on the list. I think there's value that they'll all bring. I do appreciate that if we're going to have hundreds of people involved in this process, it's going to take task forces or focus groups that own segments of this project. And I think we all ought to demand that of our staff and of the steering committee and the planners, that's what they do. They need to tap into the great resources that we've got in this community to give shape to this plan. I was a part of the 1993, and maybe these got approved 2 years later, but the 1993 group that was, and the 2008 group that put together the 2010 plan. And they involved a lot of people, not just the membership. And I think that's really key, that this needs to be a collaborative process. It needs to be iterative, so that people see the links between the documents, the plans, the information that's gathered from the community, that they actually see it evolve into the plan. Nobody should be surprised by the outcomes that there are in this plan, because it will be that kind of iterative, collaborative, engaging process. I think this is needed to go forward, and I appreciate the committee wanting to move this forward at this time. So
Thank you.
And I thank you for having taken the time, and Mr. Chairman, probably more so from you, taking the time to try to arrive at a list that is more representative of the community.
Thank you. All right, so I think we need to reintroduce the motion at this time.
And Mr. Chair, I think I erred in saying that you could table it. I think Mrs. Mastrogiovanni would have to have tabled it, so maybe if she reintroduces it, I don't even know what the process is. But I think you would have to reintroduce it.
Yeah, why don't you
since you're- yeah.
reintroduce it, Roberta? Thank you.
We move to establish a master plan steering committee to help guide the City of Keene master plan update and appoint the individuals nominated by the mayor and planning board chair, as listed on the memo to the planning board dated December 18th, 2023.
May I ask for a second? Ms. Levine?
Second the motion.
Thank you. All right. Let's move to a vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion is passed. Thank you.
Point of, I would just like to say that I abstain from the vote is my,
Okay. Yeah, that will be noted in the minutes, I think, right? Thank you. Okay. Staff have any updates to tell us about?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No updates at this time.
No updates, okay. Any new business? Anyone have new business they would like to introduce? Hearing none, we'll move on to the upcoming dates of interest. So we have the Joint Committee of the Planning Board and PLD meeting set for January 8th at 6:30 PM. Planning Board Steering Committee, January 9th, 11 a.m. Planning Board Site Visit, January 17th, 8 a.m., which will be confirmed depending on applications that we've received. And then finally, our next regularly scheduled Planning Board meeting will be January 22nd at 6:30 p.m. Is that a holiday? No.
No, the Monday before is
Oh,
a holiday,
15th,
but the
okay, all right,
22nd
great.
is not a holiday.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay. With that, I will adjourn this meeting at 7:32 p.m.